This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Welcome to another special episode in this series of Q&A podcasts. And a lot of these Q&A podcasts I'm doing on my Instagram live sessions, but occasionally I'll do other special episodes on this particular sub-feed of the feed. And in this one, I ask Robyn a very specific set of questions which lead to maybe the most emotional and even heartbreaking moments of her life and the life of her family and how she survived it and really and managed to bounce back and, you know, create a new life for herself, which eventually led to she and I meeting. And it was, I think this episode was very emotional for Robyn, and it was emotional for me. And it was, I wanted to be careful while I was asking her questions and be as gentle as possible. And let me know, or let us both know, what you think of these things. Most of these episodes will be Q&A sessions where people on my Instagram Live are asking us questions. If you have questions for me or any feedback at all, please write reviews on wherever you find your podcast. Subscribe to the podcast, like the podcast. It helps. I can't even tell you how much that helps me and helps us. And at the same time, if you have questions for us, you can ask me on Twitter at @JAltucher, or Robyn is at @RAltucher, or you can email me at altucher@gmail.com. And now, here's the episode. Enjoy might be the wrong word, but enjoy. Welcome to the Robyn and James Show. This is going to be Robyn's podcast, but I'll introduce it. This is her very first time starting. But, so Robyn, I have a very important question to ask you. What's it like to be married to James Altucher? I mean, I'm sure your listeners want to know. No, I'm just kidding. It's a horrible thing for her. But how do you feel on your first podcast?
Well, it's fun, and it's fun being married to you.
Why? What's so fun about it?
Well,
I'm always podcasting or writing or doing other things and not spending as much time.
No, but it's fun because when we wake up, we don't really I don't know. It's just fun to experiment with you and to.
What are you experimenting on? What kind of experiments are you doing on me?
Every day, we just don't know what our day's going to be like, and then it turns into this wonderful day, and at the end, we're happy.
It's true. Every day since we've met, I have traveled more in the past year. We've been married for a year and 3 months. I've traveled more in the past year and 3 months than I've ever traveled in all my entire life before that. And so you're a traveler. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Like, you have a very interesting backstory, very unusual, very different from anyone else I've known. So why don't you give the audience a little bit of your flavor?
Well, I moved overseas, I don't know, in 2005.
2005.
To Ghana, and we were there for 3 years. And then after that, China for 6 years, and then Kuwait for 3, and then to New York. And so it's been.
So wait, you were in Ghana 3, China 6, so that's 9, and Kuwait for 3, so it's 12 years. Your kids basically grew up in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East.
Right.
And you have 3 kids now together. We have 5 kids, 3 from you, 2 from me.
Right.
And one thing which we're going to talk about is parenting. How do you parent like all these different shapes and sizes and so on? You're like an expert in that. Like, you have a very unusual experience. And also, you've parented them in the U.S. and abroad. And also, you've dealt with tragedy. Maybe you can share that story.
Right. So in 2015, we were living in Kuwait, and my husband at the time was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was 50 years old.
So when you say diagnosed, was he having pains?
Just a little bit, not much, but just a little bit of pain. And so he decided to go to the doctor, and they found a dark mass when we were in Kuwait. And then they sent him to Houston, to get further, evaluation. And then they came back to us and said he was at a stage 4
Stage 4, which is
cancer.
what does that mean actually?
Well, that just means you're terminal, and that they gave him 6 months to a year to live. And so, but unfortunately, he passed away less than 30 days after he was diagnosed with that.
Wow, so he was experiencing some pain, enough, but it must have been serious enough that he went to a doctor about it.
Right.
So like he would be like, ow, or like would it be noticeable?
He wouldn't. Yeah, but he just, my stomach just doesn't feel right. I don't know. There's something going on. And so that's, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like he was in tremendous pain, but it was enough for him that he felt that he needed to go, because he never had felt that type of pain before.
And why did they give him 6 months to a year and then there was only 30 days? Like, do you think if he had never gone to the doctor, he would have died within 30 days?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had a kidney failure and such. So yeah, he wouldn't have lasted.
And how did you kind of navigate that between getting him proper care as he was getting more and more sick, and also dealing with your kids' questions? Like, how did you describe to the kids what was happening?
Well, I didn't have to describe it because they were there. We all flew to the States, and he was put into hospice in our home in Galveston. And
so wait, when he got the diagnosis, though, how did you explain it to all the kids?
Well, I said that, well, he explained it to them before he went to the States. He sat them all down before he left and said he has cancer, and that we don't know the extent of it, but, I'm going to go to the States and find out more. So that's what he told them.
So then in the States, is that where he found out it was stage 4?
Yes.
Or?
Yes. And so then I didn't, when I found out, we immediately the next day flew to the States, and then met him. He had already been moved into the home, our home in Galveston. And
it's fortunate, MD Anderson, just so people know, MD Anderson is maybe the first or second best cancer facility in the entire United States. Sloan Kettering, maybe the Mayo Clinic, I don't know, but definitely Sloan Kettering and MD Anderson. It's fortunate that MD Anderson's in Houston, which is right next to Galveston, which was his family home.
Right. So when we arrived, it was very difficult because, they saw him there, and he explained to them, that they gave him 6 months, to a year. And
so in Houston, they gave him 6 months to a year. I'm sorry to interrupt. They gave him 6 months to a year. And then fortunately, he was at a nice place to stay right near there, his father's home. And he started staying there. And then what happened? Like, did he suddenly?
Well, when we got there, we had other family members there. So we were not just alone. We had family around us all the time. And so it just sort of, I don't know, to be honest, it's just a blur to me. Still, there's a lot of it that I don't remember, but it was just a daily, keeping him comfortable. He was in more pain for some reason than he was when he was in Kuwait.
Do you think it because it grew fast, the tumors or whatever?
Possibly, it was a very fast growing.
Do you think there's anything he could have done, like, I don't know, at that stage? Is there anything he could have done?
We tried to get him to do different things, see different doctors. He just wasn't interested in going anywhere. He just wanted to stay there. And so we stayed.
Like, how fast was he in hospice?
Within a week.
Wow. So he got diagnosis with 6 months to a year, and then within a week, he's in hospice care.
Right. And because they really couldn't give him the therapy treatments that could have helped him, because he had liver damage from drinking. And so they said that if they gave him that treatment, that it would have killed him right away. So he couldn't have that treatment.
And so once he was under hospice, your kids were there, you were there, other family members were there. Right. Were you able to kind of, were the kids and you were able to spend time with him, or was it
Of
just
course.
constantly doctors and people? And
No, we just had a nurse, a couple nurses there at all times, and um, our family. So we were with them the whole time. We rarely left, and when we did, we would take him with us to eat or something, or so he would move around every day pretty much until the very end when he really couldn't move too much. But
was he like in starting from that moment though, was he in so much pain that he couldn't really enjoy conversations, or was it?
yes, so he, you know, every day it was just progressively worse and worse, and so you could tell uh, failure of his organs, like his kidney failure and liver, and he would start to swell, and it was just a very terrible thing to watch. And the kids, of course, were there, and there's, that's you try to protect your kids from any pain or any sadness, but in something like this, there's no way that you can protect them from that because
And,
they're there.
and how did you like, given that you were balancing, also trying to calm Peter down, your husband, while this was happening, and you were trying to manage, just general family affairs and what this would mean for you and the kids, but just emotionally, like as a parent, how would you? So your kids at that time were what ages?
So let's see, John was 16, um, and then Sarah was 14,
Lily was 13,
and Lily was
12 or
12.
13.
Yeah.
So a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And so how would you kind of take care of them during this time? Like, what were they doing?
Well, I mean, we tried to make it, as just normal as possible. I mean, we wouldn't sit around and cry, and but we would do things. I would actually take the kids out to the beach, or my brother-in-law would take them out, and again, we had family in the whole time, so they were busy. The kids were kept busy, by either me or my brother and sister-in-laws, or you know, and
But they must have had a lot of questions.
yes, and my family was there. I mean, my brother-in-law was there. He's a doctor, and so he was able to go walk through everything with them and answer questions.
Like,
And
what would they ask?
oh gosh, basically what's happening. Why is he swollen? Why are his ankles swollen? Why, just they watched him die.
I mean, did they? So there's these 5 stages of grief, right? Denial, and then bargaining, and
I feel like none of us knew that it was going to be so fast because they gave us 6 months to a year. And so we weren't, we didn't realize it was going to be 24 days or 25 days, whatever it was.
like, did you think though you were going to go back to Kuwait?
Well, we thought that we would eventually, because all of our things were there, and our dog and everything. We just left. We just left everything. And so that was not on our mind at the time. I mean, the kids were out of school. I took them out of school. I didn't take them out all the way, but they were allowed to do work if they needed to, if they wanted to. But the school's like, don't worry about school right now. Just be, let them be with their dad. And so, of course, they didn't do any schoolwork. They spent most of their time, with their dad, or, doing things together with the family.
And then at what point did you realize this is over the tipping point, that
Well,
this is worse than the doctors had said?
right. Well, when his I believe it was his liver failing, or his kidneys, or his body would swell. His ankles would get really large, and he couldn't walk or move. So with my brother-in-law there, he would tell us what was happening, and that it's that he felt that it was going to be quite soon.
Your brother-in-law,
Peter
Peter
Openshaw,
Openshaw,
yeah,
who's a well-known doctor. He's a good doctor.
yes, in England, and so he would tell us what was happening because otherwise there was no way we would know. And so it was very comforting having him there, because that way we didn't have to call a doctor all the time, and he was there for the kids to ask any questions. And
when did he realize that, okay, it's not going to be 6 months to a year, it might be a week?
Well, when he saw him, the swelling in his legs.
And what did he say to you?
I believe he said it was his organs were shutting down. So that's his kidneys weren't able to process anything. So it was just kind of going into his body. I think, honestly, it was a blur.
And then when he's saying this, did anyone ask, well, what does this mean for the 6 months to a year, or how did that come up?
No, I don't remember it coming up. We weren't thinking like that. We were just thinking day by day. We didn't think that it would come to such a quick death for him, but
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
But right, so then, at some point though, you must have realized, or Peter Openshaw must have realized, that it would be quick.
Right. I don't remember. I honestly don't. I mean, it was just how can you prepare for something like that?
How'd you tell the kids?
No, the kids were there. I didn't tell them anything. I mean, they were there the whole time. They saw everything. They heard everything. I spent their whole life protecting them from any pain, from any, anything. But I was a helicopter mom. And this was the one time that I couldn't do anything. There was nothing I could do but to be there and to survive and to survive, with them, and to try to be strong. And
I think I can't even imagine going through that. I mean, it's horrible. I imagine at night I would think of my kids sleeping and what were they thinking, laying awake at night, and there was nothing I can do to make them feel better.
Right. No, it's that, and along with seeing your spouse there as well. They put a bed next to my bed so that we had a nurse in all the time, but I was with him all the time, and at night, and the doctors would sit, or the nurse and my brother-in-law would, tell me things like it's not going to be very long. And I'm just like, wow, I don't know what to do, So they say if it's a shallow breath or to let them know, or to wake the nurse up or something. And sure enough, that happened. And I had to wake the nurse up, and he was dying. So we had to wake up the kids, and it's terrible.
So you woke up the kids?
Yeah, and brought them in, and everybody was there when he died.
And then how did you, I mean, it seems like you had to deal with so many things. It seems almost beyond superhuman, like, John, Sarah, Lily, your kids now are stepkids, or my stepkids, but they're such good kids. Like, how did you, and every kid needs something different, right? Every kid has different ways of dealing with emotions. And and you had to kind of navigate that.
Right. Well, I had a lot of help, from my family, and I couldn't have gone through it, I don't think, without them. And our family was scattered all over the world, and they came from Dubai and England and California, Mexico, um, and we're a family that we all lived so far away from each other, but when the crisis like that happened, I mean, we all came together, and so I'm very thankful that I have a family like that.
And I'm sure they all helped spend time with the kids and console them and console you. But like, what would you recommend if a parent has to explain like a really, or has to deal with, maybe not explain it, maybe explain's the wrong word, but has to help the kids navigate a tragedy that's so personal to both you and them? What do you sort of say?
Well, I felt like I had to be strong. I mean, I was the only parent left for them, and I was not strong, really. I didn't feel on the inside, but I had to, try to show that strength. But there are times that I would break down, and they would see me cry, and that's okay. I mean, I figured out that that's okay to do. That's life, and I don't want to give them a false, you know, example of what they should do if they're sad or angry. I mean, you should show the kids your emotions, because it is normal to have these emotions. So the best thing I could say is just to be there for them, and to let them be sad, and go through all that. You guys, we would go through it together. One thing I did do, though, is after he passed away, we went back to Kuwait, and it was after about 30 days. We stayed in the States for 30 days, but then I thought it's time for us to go back, and I wanted to get him back into school, and I felt like giving them some sort of normality, of a routine that they're used to, would be good. And so that's what we did. And so we flew back. And plus, I had to pack up and get ready to repatriate back to the States. And we stayed there from November until January of 2016. We were allowed to stay in there at the camp. And so it gave us some time to, go through the process of all this. But we did some counseling while we were in Galveston for that month while we were there. So that was helpful. And I think just getting sort of back into a routine was a good idea.
And was it?
So, yeah, I think so. And then continuing on grief therapy, I think, was helpful as well.
What are you learning in grief therapy?
Just how to cope with a loss, and the kids seem to do pretty well with that, because the counselor told me that all three of the kids were very good at dealing with loss, because being a child, an expat kid that moves from one culture to the next, and experiences something like death, because they lose their friends, they lose their home, they lose everything. So when you go from one, when we went from Ghana to China, they left all their friends, a whole different world, and so that's a big loss for them. And they dealt with it, and they started a new life in China. And so they were in China for 6 years, and then they made lots of friends, and it was their home. And then we moved to Kuwait, and so they had to leave all their friends in China. And
they still keep in touch with some of those friends?
Yeah, hmm But it was still very hard for them.
Yeah.
And then same with Kuwait, leaving their home in Kuwait they loved and their friends,
So
and having to come to the States where they hadn't lived their whole life, coming back to their passport country, and coming back to this culture that they're American. And it was hard for them because they weren't used to, you know, they would judge themselves against their own culture, and it was not easy. It still isn't easy for them. They feel much more relaxed overseas because they don't judge themselves.
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
No, well, actually, let's think about that. So, so first off, when you repatriated, not all three kids moved back to the United States with you.
Right. So my oldest, John, he decided to finish high school in London and stay with his aunt and uncle there.
Why didn't he want to come back here?
He just wanted to, I don't know. He just didn't want to come back to the States. He wanted to stay abroad.
And you
And
were.
that was fine with me, because he loves his aunt and uncle. And so I knew he was safe.
But when you last saw him, like you're in Kuwait, you're packing up, you're getting on the plane, and you last saw him before moving back to the United States with your two daughters, and him not there.
It was very difficult because as a family, when you live abroad, you are a very close-knit family, because when you move from one culture to the next, and then you move to this new continent, this new culture, all you have is your family that you know. So you become very close to each other because you're sort of scared. You go from one place to the next and you don't know anybody. So the kids don't know anyone, so you become a very close-knit family. And so that's how we were. We've never been apart. I mean, was only away from my kids twice in their whole life. And that was only to go to look for another residence in another country, and we were only gone for a few days. So it was hard when he left and he went off on his plane and we went out on our plane, and I knew he was not going to be with us. It was hard.
And then, of course, you moved to New York City, and it's difficult to live in New York City. Like, were you nervous? What were the things you were nervous about?
Right. Well, New York, I thought, because the company said we have to repatriate you back to the States. Where do you want to go? And I was like, wow, I don't know. I don't want to go back to Texas. I don't want to go back to California. And my late husband was from New York City. So I thought, well, maybe we go here. And I had a small support system here. And so I thought, oh, we'll just do that. And it's multicultural and the kids will feel more comfortable maybe, rather than going to a homogenous area. And so then they could take the subway. They were used to big cities. So I thought we'd go to New York. And so we moved here. And then I was thinking, wow, I can't believe I moved us here to New York. It's like really difficult to live. I didn't know anybody.
Yeah, New York City is one of those places when everybody moves here, they kind of go through the same thing, which is that it's infinitely crowded and yet infinitely lonely at the same time. And also it's scary because it's hard to live here. Like financially, no matter how much money you have, New York City presents more and more challenges, to live here. Like it's difficult and to make connections. Everybody, when you first move to New York City, I always feel like everybody wants something from you, or there's an agenda. Everybody's got some sort of agenda. And it doesn't happen in other cities. Like other cities, people are fine about, oh, a new friend, I'll get to know them. Mm-hmm. In New York City, people want to get to know you if they can get something. Yes. And I don't say that in a bad way. It's not like they're scheming. It's just that's the way New York City is very transactional that way.
Very much so. And I was not used to that at all. But like you said, I mean, it's a very hard place to meet people. And I've never been so lonely in my life, even though I'm around so many people, but I didn't know anybody and no one really reached out. all my friends were living overseas. So at least I had friends that I can communicate with, through the phone or through Facebook or something, WhatsApp, calling them. But yeah, so it was not easy at all. And so, and then I had been married for so long, and then being single, and moving here, haven't worked in, since I sold my business. When I sold my business in 2000, I guess. So it's been
It's been like 16 years.
Long time, right? Since I had worked, and now I had to take care of me and 3 kids. So this is really crazy. I think about how did I survive, and I did, but I didn't think about it. I just did it. You just couldn't. I had to just take it one day at a time, because if I thought about everything I had to do, if I thought about when I flew back to Kuwait that I had to move our whole house and repatriate, I would have just, I don't know, I would freeze thinking about it. Like, how am I going to do this? But every day, I didn't think about it. It was a huge hill I had to climb, a mountain, and I just had to do it one step at a time.
I think that's the key. Like, I think if I were in a similar situation, I've never been in the exact same situation, but I've been in situations where I didn't know how I would be able to take care of my family. And I think it was a really hard challenge for me to learn how to not to project too far into the future, because then there's always disaster waiting for you right around the corner if you think about it too much. And taking it one step at a time is incredibly important. But some days I just wouldn't be able to do it. It would be really scary. I don't know, like, how do you kind of force yourself to really stay in the present and say, what can I do right now that can help me, as opposed to just panicking about what's right around the corner?
Well, yes, and that was hard, and I had to change the way I was thinking, because I would wander off thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Why did I move to New York? What are you doing, Robyn? And at those times that's when I was thinking about the future. It's like, where am I going? And I couldn't allow myself to be in that place very long, because I could feel myself really just spiraling down. So I had to stop.
And
I did that, right? But I stopped by not just telling myself to stop. I had to get up. A lot of times I just wouldn't get dressed. I would just be in my pajamas or something, and but I would just get up, get dressed like I was going to work, and leave, walk out the door. I didn't have anywhere to go, but I had to move. I had to just move. I would go out into the streets, and so many people walking, I just go walk with them, and I just walk somewhere, and with nowhere to go, but at least I was moving around, and I was able to think while I was moving. And it was better for me to do that than just sitting and thinking about what I need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, but that's interesting, because you can't think your way out of disaster. You can't think your way out of stress. You can't think your way out of anxiety. Like, ultimately, the brain wasn't sort of set up to do that. The brain was there to sort of get food and outwit our competitors for food. Right. But you have to actually do things to get food. You have to do things to trigger all the neurochemicals. On the one hand, you view it biologically, like you have to do things to trigger dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all of these chemicals that make us feel accomplished and like we can succeed and so on. And more philosophically, you have to do things to know you're doing them. You can't just sort of sit and and feel this fight or flight instinct. You have to kind of actually fight or flight. You have to actually, those are action verbs, those instincts. Like the body has to fight something or fly from something.
Right.
Freeze is almost the worst of those instincts, because then you're just going to get destroyed.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
Look, that was very traumatic. This was started. What we realized on our first date was that I had not as traumatic as you, but I had a traumatic end to my marriage the exact same month. And, so there was a lot of things that was happening in parallel, and, similar kinds of fears. But to hear the next step in your story and to continue with how you parent through tragedy and trauma and really get through these things, and then ultimately how we met each other and related and argued. We don't always agree on everything. Let us know if you like this episode, and we'll do more and release more. Did you enjoy your very first podcast? Not to be enjoyed. We talked about such sad, tragic things, and we didn't even intend to talk about these things. It was just kind of, sometimes I let the questions sort of just direct me.
Right.
But
and also talking about what I did to make money, and for the first time in 16 years, how I
can't even imagine. And we'll save that for the next one. How do you make money when you haven't worked in 16 years? How do you raise parents at the same time? What happened when you were single? I mean, we'll see. We don't want to go too far into that until we meet me. But thanks for being a guest thanks for having me as a guest on your show. So I'm a guest interviewer on your show. Let us know if you like it.